The Pokédex is lying to you. The Pokémon world's darkest lore comes from real-world horror, nightmare demons, zombie parasites, and unsolved child abductions that Game Freak quietly adapted. This is the disturbing truth behind your favorite Pokémon. You thought Darkrai was just a cool legendary with a dark side? You were wrong. This thing is straight up demonic. Its job is simple: inflict endless, horrific nightmares. The Pokédex doesn't pull punches. It lulls people to sleep and makes them dream. But the true horror is its inspiration, the Nachnista. This is an ancient Slavic nightmare spirit, a demonic entity that doesn't just give you a bad dream. It sits on your chest, causing suffocation, and feeds on your life energy while you're paralyzed. The parallels are not subtle. Darkrai is the modern, digital form of a centuries-old fear, the creature that preys on you when you are most vulnerable. Think about that. Game Freak took the terror of sleep paralysis and night terrors, that horrifying moment where your brain wakes up but your body is locked down, and gave it a name: Darkrai. They crystallized a primal human fear into a Pokémon. This is the pattern we're exposing today. But Darkrai's lore goes even deeper. In Pokémon mythology, Darkrai is capable of creating entire realms of nightmare, trapping victims in endless loops of their worst fears. The Pokédex entries across multiple games consistently emphasize its ability to lull people to sleep and make them dream, but never specifies whether these victims ever truly wake up. This connects back to the Slavic Nachnista legend, where victims would waste away from repeated attacks, their life energy slowly drained by the nightmare demon. Darkrai represents the ultimate fear of losing control over your own mind, of being trapped in a reality you can't escape. But if Darkrai represents the horror of being trapped in your own mind, what about a Pokémon that represents being trapped in the physical world forever? A creature born from a tragedy so profound that its spirit becomes bound to the very earth. If Darkrai represents the horror of the night, Phantump represents the tragedy of being lost forever. According to its Pokédex entries, Phantump are the spirits of children who became lost in the forest and perished. The Pokédex from Pokémon Y says, "These Pokémon are stumps possessed by the spirits of children who died while lost in the forest." This is a heartbreaking concept, and it's one deeply embedded in folklore worldwide. In Japan, there are stories of yurei, specifically ghost children, whose spirits are bound to the place of their death because they cannot move on. Similarly, many cultures have tales of haunted woods where the voices of lost children can be heard, trying to lead travelers astray to share their fate. Phantump is a direct embodiment of this specific tragedy. Its cry is described as sounding like a child's scream, which it uses to confuse and scare people. This plays on the very real primal fear of getting lost, especially for a child. The folklore serves as a cautionary tale, but the Pokémon version adds a unique twist. The spirit merges with a tree stump. This combines the idea of a lost soul with the ancient concept of kodama, spirits that inhabit trees in Japanese mythology. A Phantump isn't just a ghost, it's a part of the forest itself now, a permanent monument to a life cut short. This creates a Pokémon that is both pitiable and eerie. It's a reminder that the wilderness, for all its beauty, can be unforgiving. The transformation of a human child into a ghost/grass-type Pokémon is a unique kind of body horror, suggesting a fusion with nature that is anything but peaceful. It's a permanent, woody prison for a soul that never found its way home. This idea of transformation, of a living thing being changed into something else against its will, is a dark theme we'll see explored in an even more visceral and scientific way next. But first, the existence of Phantump makes you wonder about the other spirits that might be trapped in the Pokémon world. What about spirits that weren't just lost, but were deliberately bound together as punishment? This brings us to Spiritomb, one of the most conceptually dark Pokémon ever created. Its Pokédex entry from Pokémon Diamond is chilling. A Pokémon that was formed by 108 spirits. It is bound to a fissure in an odd keystone. The number 108 is not random. In Buddhist and Japanese traditions, this number is profoundly significant. It represents the number of earthly temptations or defilements that a human must overcome to achieve enlightenment. In some traditions, temple bells are rung 108 times on New Year's to purify people of these 108 sins. Spiritomb turns this concept on its head. Instead of being purified, 108 evil spirits were gathered and bound together into a single chaotic entity as punishment, sealed away by a keystone. The real-world parallel here is powerful. It's the concept of a spiritual prison. Folklore across Asia is filled with stories of powerful monks or sorcerers binding malevolent spirits or demons to objects, a vase, a statue, a stone, to prevent them from causing harm. Spiritomb is the ultimate expression of this. It's not one ghost, it's a conglomerate of 108 of them, all vying for control, creating a being of pure, concentrated malice. The keystone is the lock, and the Pokédex warns that it must never be moved. This taps into the universal Pandora's box mythos, the fear of unleashing something that was sealed away for a very good reason. What makes Spiritomb especially disturbing is the implication of eternity. These spirits aren't just trapped, they're fused together forever. There's no hope of individual salvation or release. It's an eternal punishment for 108 entities, their identities lost, merged into one monstrous whole. This is a different kind of horror from Phantump's lonely tragedy or Darkrai's nightly torment. This is a horror of divine, or perhaps demonic, justice. It makes you question what kind of acts these spirits committed to deserve such a fate, and it introduces the idea that the Pokémon world has its own history of dealing with evil on a scale that required extreme, permanent measures. This exploration of bound spirits and punished evils naturally leads us to a more active, predatory horror. What about a Pokémon that doesn't wait for you to get lost or stumble upon its seal? What about a Pokémon that actively hunts, using its powers not to punish, but to feed? That's a transition that takes us from the spiritual to the biological, to a horror based not in myth, but in cold, hard science. If Spiritomb represents a contained ancient evil, Hypno represents a threat that is very much active and walking among us. Its Pokédex entries are some of the most consistently disturbing in the entire franchise. Pokemon Moon states, it carries a pendulum-like device. There once was an incident in which it took away a child it hypnotized. This isn't vague folklore, this reads like a police report. The inspiration here is pulled directly from modern urban legends and societal fears, specifically the archetype of the predatory stranger who uses trickery to lure children away. The real-world parallel is the hypnotic kidnapper, or the figure who uses a mesmerizing object like a pocket watch or a pendulum to gain control over their victim. These stories tap into a deep-seated parental fear of a child being stolen, not through force, but through deception, a loss of agency that feels even more violating. Hypno embodies this fear perfectly. It's not a monstrous beast. It's a humanoid Pokemon that walks upright, making its intrusion into human spaces feel more plausible and sinister. Its design, with its sleepy eyes and the pendulum it carries, directly references the classic imagery of a stage hypnotist. What makes this especially effective is that the Pokédex doesn't just say it hypnotizes people, it specifies children, and it mentions a specific incident. This grounding in a purported historical event makes the threat feel real within the Pokemon world's context. It transforms Hypno from a simple psychic type into a creature with a potential criminal history. This connection to urban legend is a brilliant move by the creators. Instead of reaching back centuries for inspiration, they tapped into a fear that is very much alive in the modern consciousness. It suggests that the dangers in the Pokemon world aren't all ancient ghosts and forest spirits. Some are contemporary monsters that exploit the vulnerabilities of society. But Hypno's method is psychological control. What about a horror that is far more physical? A horror that invades and consumes the body from the inside out. That leads us to one of the most chilling examples of real-world science inspiring Pokemon lore. Parasect presents a different kind of terror, one rooted not in myth, but in the observable, real-world horror of nature. The Pokédex entry from Pokemon Red is blunt. A host-parasite pair in which the parasite mushroom has taken over the host bug. It prefers damp places. This is a near-perfect fictionalization of a very real biological phenomenon, parasitic fungi, specifically the Ophiocordyceps family. These fungi infect insects, typically ants, and manipulate their behavior. The fungus grows inside the host, eventually taking over its nervous system and forcing it to climb to a high point. There, the fungus kills the insect and erupts from its body to release spores, ensuring its propagation. The parallel to Parasect is undeniable. Paras starts as a bug host with parasitic mushrooms on its back. Upon evolution into Parasect, the mushrooms have completely taken over. The bug's eyes are blank, devoid of life or will. The Pokémon is effectively a zombie, a corpse being puppeteered by the fungal parasite. This is body horror at its most primal. It's the fear of losing control of your own body, of being consumed and used by something else. The Pokédex entry from Sun adds another layer. It's not clear if it's truly alive. The mushroom on its back is said to have done all the thinking ever since it was a Paras. This confirms the takeover is complete. The original Paras is gone, and only the parasite remains. This connection to real-world science makes Parasect uniquely disturbing because it's not fantasy. It's an exaggerated version of something that actually happens. The concept of a zombie ant is a scientific reality. By incorporating this, Game Freak tapped into a fear that is both ancient and cutting edge. It blurs the line between the natural world and a horror movie. Parasect serves as a reminder that nature can be brutal and unforgiving, and that the loss of self is a fate that can happen in the real world, just on a smaller scale. But if Parasect shows a horror that consumes a single host, what about a horror that consumes on a much larger, more insatiable scale? What about a being whose hunger isn't just for control, but for total annihilation? That question takes us from the microscopic to the cosmic. Guzzlord represents a shift in scale and inspiration. As an Ultra Beast, it comes from a dimension beyond the known Pokémon world, and its design and behavior are a clear nod to the cosmic horror genre pioneered by H.P. Lovecraft. The Pokédex from Sun says, it has gobbled mountains and swallowed whole buildings, according to reports. It's one of the Ultra Beasts. There is no subtlety here. Guzzlord is pure, insatiable gluttony personified. Its massive mouth, chaotic body plan, and single-minded drive to consume evoke Lovecraftian entities like Azathoth, or the nameless horrors that exist in the voids between stars, beings that are so vast and alien that their mere existence threatens reality. The core tenet of Lovecraftian horror is the fear of the unknowable and the insignificance of humanity in the face of cosmic forces. Guzzlord embodies this perfectly. It doesn't have a tragic backstory like Phantump or a punitive origin like Spiritomb. It doesn't hunt for survival like a predator. It consumes because consumption is its entire nature. It is a force of entropy, a walking ecological disaster. The Pokédex mentions it has a metabolism that allows it to eat almost anything, which is a chillingly clinical description for a creature that can devour landscapes. This connection is significant because it expands the scope of horror in the Pokémon world. It's no longer just about personal fears like nightmares or abduction, or even biological fears like parasitism. Guzzlord introduces a cosmological fear. It implies that the universe is home to entities that are utterly indifferent to life as we know it, beings that could arrive and unmake everything without malice or purpose, simply because it is their nature to do so. This is a different class of threat altogether. It raises the stakes from personal tragedy to potential world-ending events. But cosmic horror is vast and impersonal. What about a horror that is deeply personal? One that is tied to art, memory, and the objects we create. This shift from the cosmic back to the intimately human leads us to our next example, a Pokémon that turns personal history into a weapon. After the cosmic dread of Guzzlord, Litwick brings the horror back to a more intimate, more deceptive level. Its Pokédex entry from Black is terrifyingly simple. While shining a light and pretending to be a guide, it leeches off the life force of any followers it has. This is a direct, perfect translation of the will-o'-the-wisp phenomenon, ghostly lights in folklore that lure travelers off the safe path and into treacherous bogs to drown. Litwick is the ultimate embodiment of misplaced trust. It appears helpful, offering light in the darkness, but its assistance is a deadly trap. The concept of a spirit that feeds on life force is common, but Litwick combines it with the terror of betrayal. And just look at its final form, Chandelure. Its white Pokédex entry is a horrifyingly specific fate. It can burn the spirit of its victim, leaving the body behind. This folklore connection works because it plays on a universal fear, following the wrong light. It's a cautionary tale about what you trust in the darkness. But deception and betrayal aren't the only ways to lure a victim. What about a predator whose beauty is as deadly as the environment it controls? That takes us from the flickering candle to the frozen, merciless landscape, and the truth of Froslass. Litwick's deception leads us to another folkloric predator, one whose beauty is as deadly as its environment. Froslass is explicitly based on the Yuki-onna, one of the most famous figures in Japanese folklore. The Pokédex entry from Diamond leaves little doubt. It freezes humans it doesn't like and takes them to its lair, where they're used as decorations. This is a near-perfect match for the Yuki-onna, or Snow Woman, a ghostly spirit who appears on snowy nights. She is often depicted as a beautiful woman with pale skin and long black hair, wearing a white kimono. But her beauty is a lure. She leads travelers to their deaths in snowstorms, freezing them solid. The connection goes deeper than just a shared method of killing. In many stories, the Yuki-onna has a specific interest in men, sometimes even sparing one she takes a liking to, only to return years later. This adds a layer of tragic romance to the horror. Froslass's Pokédex entry in Platinum adds a crucial, disturbing detail. It's said that on nights during a full moon, Froslass will search for men it regards as handsome and freeze them. This directly mirrors the Yuki-onna's selective predation. The horror here isn't just death, it's the objectification of the victim. They aren't just killed, they are used as decorations, their frozen bodies becoming trophies in Froslass's icy lair. This transforms a natural death from exposure into a deliberate, artistic act of cruelty. What makes this folklore so effective as a basis for Froslass is the atmosphere it creates. The Yuki-onna is a spirit of the winter landscape itself, beautiful, serene, and utterly merciless. Froslass captures this duality perfectly. Its design is elegant and flowing, like a snowdrift, but its expression is cold and empty. It represents the indifference of nature, the idea that a beautiful scene can hide a lethal threat. This is a different kind of fear from Hypno's urban legend or Parasect's body horror. It's a fear of the environment itself turning against you, personified by a spirit that is as much a part of the winter as the snow and ice. But if Froslass represents a natural, albeit personified danger, what about a horror that is entirely man-made? What about a danger that comes from history itself, from objects that have absorbed the suffering of the past? That question leads us from the frozen wilderness to the haunted gallery. Runerigus introduces a more esoteric but deeply unsettling type of horror, the haunted object. Its Pokédex entry from Sword explains its origin. A powerful curse was used to bind its spirit to a painting, creating this Pokémon. It can sense the emotions of others. The inspiration here is drawn from a wide array of global folklore about cursed artifacts, paintings, statues, dolls, or rune-covered stones that carry a malevolent presence. The most famous real-world parallel is the concept of a haunted painting, where the subject's spirit is trapped within the artwork, often bringing misfortune to anyone who possesses it. Runerigus takes this a step further. It's not just a spirit in a painting. The spirit and the painting have fused to become a new entity. The runes etched all over its body suggest a specific ritualistic form of magic used to create this binding. This connects to legends of ancient sorcerers using runes or glyphs to imprison spirits for protection or punishment. The horror of Runerigus is the horror of contaminated history. It's the idea that an object can be a vessel for centuries of pain, anger, or tragedy, and that by touching it, you risk being exposed to that psychic residue. The Pokédex adds a crucial psychological element. It can sense the emotions of others. This isn't just a mindless monster, it's an entity that feeds on or is activated by emotional energy, particularly negative emotions. This ties into the modern concept of a poltergeist, where emotional turmoil can attract or empower a spiritual presence. Runerigus becomes a manifestation of historical trauma, a being created from a singular act of magical violence that now resonates with the suffering of the present. It makes you wonder about the story behind the original painting. What was the powerful curse, and why was it cast? This focus on a singular, tragic creation story makes Runerigus feel unique, but it also raises a larger question about the nature of spirits in the Pokémon world. If a spirit can be bound to a painting, what about spirits that merge together voluntarily or out of necessity? What about a collective spirit born not from a curse but from a shared monumental struggle? This idea of collective identity shifts the horror from the individual to the tribal, and it brings us to our final and perhaps most poignant example. Basculegion presents a different kind of dark lore, one based on biological tragedy and spiritual belief rather than malevolent myth. Its Pokédex entry from Legends Arceus is profound. Clads itself in the souls of comrades that died during the journey to their spawning grounds. The souls having nowhere to go, Basculegion accepts them into its own body. This is a powerful concept that blends the very real, often tragic phenomenon of salmon migration with spiritual ideas of ancestor worship and collective souls. In the real world, salmon undertake an arduous upstream migration to spawn, and many die from exhaustion, predation, or injury along the way. Basculegion is inspired by this natural struggle, but the Pokémon lore adds a supernatural layer. The souls of the fallen Basculin do not dissipate. They gather and merge with a survivor, empowering it to become Basculegion. This is not a curse or a possession. It's portrayed as a form of sacrifice and unity. The surviving Basculin becomes a vessel for the spirits of its school, a living memorial to their shared journey. The real-world parallel here is less about a specific monster and more about cultural beliefs. Many indigenous cultures, including the Ainu people of Japan who inspired the Hisui region, hold beliefs about animals having spirits and about the importance of honoring those that are sacrificed for food or survival. The concept of a school of souls echoes ideas of ancestral spirits guiding and strengthening the living. The dark aspect of Basculegion's lore is the sheer weight of this transformation. The Pokédex notes that the process is so painful that the Basculin's body changes color and it loses its eyesight. This is a classic theme of survivor's guilt. The individual who survives a great tragedy carries the memory and the burden of those who did not. Basculegion is literally clad in that burden. It gains immense power, but at the cost of its original identity and physical well-being. It becomes a ghost of its former self, in the most literal sense, haunted by the comrades it carries within it. This makes Basculegion one of the most tragic and philosophically rich Pokémon. Its horror is not one of malice, but of sacrifice and the heavy price of survival. The pattern is clear. Pokémon's darkest lore isn't invented. It's borrowed from our world's deepest fears. From Darkrai's Slavic nightmare spirits to Parasect's zombie fungi, these creatures tap into primal anxieties that have haunted humanity for centuries. This grounding in real-world horror gives the Pokémon universe its surprising weight. The creators didn't invent new monsters. They weaponized our oldest stories. The darkness isn't a flaw. It's the secret to the franchise's enduring appeal. If these connections fascinate you, watch our next video exploring the real-world cryptids behind other Pokémon designs. Subscribe to the Pokédex files so you don't miss it.